I was halfway to the auditorium when I realised I'd forgotten my honour cords in the changing room. The morning air tasted like jasmine and fresh-cut grass. Graduation day at Whitmore University, where I'd spent 4 years clawing my way to summa cum laude. My fingers trembled as I turned back, not from nervousness, but from exhaustion. 3 all-nighters in a row to finish my thesis. 4 years of double majors. A decade of being the daughter who tried harder because trying was all I had. When I returned, breathless, my academic regalia complete, I found her sitting in my assigned seat, Natalie, my younger sister. She'd arranged herself in the front row, reserved section, where graduates with Latin honours were meant to sit. Her cream dress caught the light filtering through the tall windows. She looked radiant, unbothered, perfectly at ease in a space that wasn't hers. "Nat," I said quietly, "that's my seat." She glanced up, blue eyes wide with practiced innocence. "Oh, I know, but Mom said I could sit here. She wants better pictures of me, and the angle is perfect from this spot." My stomach dropped. "Pictures of you? Nat, this is the honours section. For graduates." "I know, Sienna." Her voice carried that particular sweetness she used when she wanted something. "But you'll be up on stage anyway, right? You won't even be sitting here most of the time. And I look really good in this dress. Mom spent so much on it. She wants the photos to be special." I looked past her, scanning the auditorium. 3 rows back, I spotted my parents. My mother was adjusting the focus on her camera, already angled toward Natalie's seat. My father was checking his phone, half present as always. "Where am I supposed to sit?" I asked. Natalie shrugged, delicate and dismissive. "There are plenty of seats in the back. It's just for a few hours, Sienna. Don't make this difficult." Don't make this difficult. As if I were the problem. As if asking for my own assigned seat at my own graduation was an imposition. I opened my mouth to argue, to explain that I'd earned this, that the seating arrangement meant something, that for once, just once, I wanted to matter more than the aesthetics of a photograph. But the words died in my throat. They always did. I'd spent 22 years learning that my needs came second, that Natalie's comfort mattered more than my dignity, that keeping the peace meant swallowing my voice until it dissolved into nothing. So I walked to the back. I sat in the last row, surrounded by strangers, while Natalie occupied the space I'd worked 4 years to earn. The ceremony blurred around me. I heard my name called for departmental honours. I walked across the stage. I accepted my diploma with both hands while scattered applause echoed through the hall. I looked for my parents in the crowd. They were focused on Natalie, capturing her delighted expression as she clapped, her joy at my achievement looking so photogenic in that front row seat. After the ceremony, we gathered outside for photos. My mother arranged us carefully. Natalie in the centre, my father on one side, herself on the other. I stood at the edge of the frame, my honours cords barely visible, my smile thin and mechanical. "Sienna, you're slouching," my mother said. "Stand up straight. You're ruining the composition." I straightened. The camera clicked. "Perfect," my mother said, already reviewing the image on her screen. "Natalie, you look absolutely stunning." My father nodded absently, checking his watch. "Should we head to lunch? I have a conference call at 3. No one asked about my thesis. No one mentioned my awards. No one acknowledged that this day was supposed to be mine. We drove to an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and waiters who spoke in reverent whispers. Natalie talked about her upcoming semester. She was starting her sophomore year in the fall, majoring in communications with a minor in something she kept changing. "I'm thinking of joining the theatre society," she said, cutting into her salmon. "They're doing Oklahoma next spring, and I'd be perfect for Laurie." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said. "You have such stage presence." I pushed my pasta around my plate. The graduation medallion felt heavy around my neck, a weight no one else seemed to notice. "Sienna," my father said suddenly, "what are your plans now?" I looked up. "I start my master's program in the fall, full scholarship, research assistantship included." "More school?" Natalie wrinkled her nose. "God, I could never. Don't you want to, live a little?" My mother laughed softly. "Sienna has always been so serious. Remember when she was 7 and organised her books by subject instead of playing outside?" They smiled at the memory, not with pride, but with bemused tolerance, as if my dedication were a charming quirk rather than deliberate effort. "The programme is at Oxford," I said quietly. "I'll be studying under Professor Whitmore. It's a significant opportunity." "Oxford?" My father's eyebrows rose. "That's in England." "Yes? How much will that cost?" "It's fully funded. They're paying me to attend." He grunted, returning to his steak. "Well, try not to forget about us while you're off being scholarly." Natalie reached across the table, squeezing my hand with performative affection. "I'm so proud of you, Sienna, even if I don't understand why you work so hard. But that's just who you are, right? Always trying to prove something." Always trying to prove something. The words settled in my chest like stones. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. My diploma sat on my desk, still in its leather folder. My honours cords were draped over my chair, evidence of achievement that no one had really seen. I thought about Oxford, about leaving, about putting an ocean between myself and this quiet, constant erasure. I thought about Natalie in my seat, radiant and unbothered. I thought about my mother's camera, always pointed away from me. I thought about how tired I was, not from studying, but from mattering so little in a family that was supposed to love me most. The exhaustion wrapped around me like water, pulling me under. I let it. There was a strange comfort in surrender, in finally stopping the endless fight to be seen. My last thought before sleep took me was soft and resigned. Maybe in another life I would matter. I didn't know I was dying. The aneurysm came quietly, a blood vessel rupturing in my brain while I slept. No pain, no warning, just a gentle unravelling, my consciousness dimming like a candle in a draught. I felt myself floating, weightless. The ceiling dissolved. The walls became transparent. Time softened into something fluid and strange. Memories flickered past, not chronologically, but emotionally. Every moment I'd been overlooked, every achievement dismissed, every time I'd made myself smaller so Natalie could shine brighter. I saw myself at 8, winning the science fair while my parents attended Natalie's ballet recital. At 12, making honour roll while they celebrated Natalie's first boyfriend. At 16, getting early acceptance to Whitmore while they threw Natalie a party for joining the cheerleading squad. Always second, always less, always the daughter who achieved without applause. The images faded. The world went soft and dark. My heartbeat slowed to a whisper, then silence. I felt no fear, only relief. Finally, I could rest. Finally, I could stop trying. Finally, it was over. I woke to the sound of rain against glass. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. My body felt wrong, lighter, smaller, unfamiliar. The mattress beneath me was too soft, the pillow too flat. The air smelled like vanilla and old textbooks. I opened my eyes. My childhood bedroom stared back at me, but younger. The walls were the same pale blue I'd painted them at 15. My desk was cluttered with high school textbooks. A poster of the periodic table hung beside my closet. I'd taken that down before college, replaced it with a Monet print. My heart began to pound. I sat up slowly, my hands shaking. They were smaller, smoother. The callus I'd developed from years of writing was gone. My nails were shorter, painted a chipped blue I recognised from junior year. I stumbled to the mirror. 17-year-old me looked back. My hair was longer, pulled into a messy braid I'd worn constantly before cutting it short for graduation. My face was rounder, still holding on to adolescent softness. I was wearing the oversized MIT t-shirt I'd slept in the night before my college acceptance letters arrived. The realization hit me like cold water. I knew this moment. I remembered it with perfect clarity. Waking up anxious and hopeful, checking my email obsessively, finding the acceptance from Whitmore with its offer of partial scholarship. I remembered the joy, quickly dimmed when my parents had seemed more concerned about the cost than the achievement. But I remembered more than that. I remembered everything that came after. 4 years of undergraduate work, the graduation ceremony, Natalie in my seat, the quiet death in my childhood bedroom. I remembered dying. I sat down on my bed, pressing my palms against my temples. My mind was too full, too crowded with years I hadn't lived yet, but somehow remembered completely. Every lecture, every exam, every moment of being overlooked while Natalie absorbed all the light in the room. This wasn't possible, but it was happening. I looked at my phone, an older model, the one I'd used in high school. The date read March 28th, College Acceptance Decision Day for Whitmore University. I had been given time back, not to relive it, to rewrite it. The panic I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt something settle into place inside me, cold and clear and steady. I knew what was coming. I knew how the story ended, with me diminished and exhausted, dying in obscurity while everyone's attention remained fixed on Natalie. But knowledge was power. And this time, I would not make myself small. I opened my laptop and checked my email. There it was, the acceptance from Whitmore, dated 1 hour ago. I read it twice, absorbing details I'd missed the first time. Full departmental honours programme. Priority consideration for research positions. A pathway to academic excellence. I also remembered what happened next. My parents would call Whitmore's financial aid office, negotiating my partial scholarship while complaining about the cost. They would compare it unfavourably to the state school Natalie planned to attend, suggesting I should choose somewhere cheaper. And I would eventually agree, grateful for whatever support they'd give, never questioning why Natalie's comfort mattered more than my future. Not this time. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Whitmore's full scholarship programs. I'd never looked before, too afraid to ask for more, too conditioned to accept less. The Presidential Scholarship, full tuition, fees, housing and a stipend for books, awarded to 20 incoming freshmen based on academic merit, leadership and a personal essay. Deadline, April 15th. I had 18 days. I began writing immediately, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I knew myself better now, knew what had mattered, what hadn't, what I'd wasted time on, and what I should have pursued. The essay poured out of me, honest and precise, about excellence not as performance, but as self-respect, about achievement as a form of dignity. I finished it in 3 hours, revised it in 2 more, submitted it before dinner. Then I went downstairs. My family was gathered in the kitchen. My mother was preparing dinner while Natalie sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone. My father was reading the newspaper, glasses perched on his nose. They looked exactly as I remembered, frozen in this moment I'd lived before. "Sienna," my mother said without looking up. "Set the table, please." I moved through the familiar motions. Plates, forks, knives, napkins. Natalie didn't offer to help. She never did. "Any college news today?" my father asked absently. "I got into Whitmore," I said, "with honours programme admission." "Oh." My mother glanced over. "That's the expensive one, isn't it?" "They offered a partial scholarship." "Partial." My father folded his newspaper. How? Partial. 40%, he frowned. That still leaves quite a bit. Natalie's state school would cost half that, even without assistance. I applied for the presidential scholarship, I said calmly. If I receive it, everything is covered. And if you don't? Then I'll take out loans. My mother's expression tightened. Sienna, that's a lot of debt. You should be practical. The state school has a perfectly good program. Natalie is going to the state school, I said. I'm going to Whitmore. Something in my tone made them both look at me properly for the first time in the conversation. There's no need to be difficult, my father said. I'm not being difficult. I'm making a decision about my own education. Natalie looked up from her phone, sensing tension. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said. I'm going to Whitmore, with or without help. The words hung in the air, stark and final. My mother's mouth thinned. My father looked genuinely surprised. Natalie's eyes widened with something like confusion, as if she couldn't understand why I wasn't simply agreeing, as I always had. I turned and walked back upstairs. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. This was who I would be now, not the daughter who bent, the daughter who stood. The scholarship letter arrived on April 30th. I opened it in my bedroom alone, my hands trembling slightly despite my outward calm. The words blurred and sharpened. Congratulations. Presidential scholarship. Full award. I'd done it. I sat on my bed, holding the letter, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not joy, exactly. Something deeper. Proof that I could claim space without asking permission. That my worth didn't require anyone else's acknowledgement. I went downstairs and handed the letter to my parents without a word. My mother read it twice. My father's expression remained carefully neutral. Well, he said finally, that's settled then? No congratulations, no pride, just resignation. Natalie appeared in the doorway. What's settled? Sienna received a full scholarship to Whitmore, my mother said flatly. Natalie's smile was bright and automatic. Oh, that's great! I'm so happy for you, Sienna. The words were right, but her eyes flickered with something else. Something that looked almost like resentment, as if my achievement had somehow taken something from her. I recognized that look now. I'd seen it before, in my first life, every time I succeeded at something. Natalie had never wanted me to fail exactly. She just wanted to remain the center, the sun everyone orbited. And my accomplishments, however dismissed, had always been a distant threat to that centrality. Thank you, I said simply. I didn't need her approval anymore. The 4 years at Whitmore passed differently this time. I joined the research lab as a freshman, already knowing which professors valued genuine curiosity over performative dedication. I built relationships instead of just accumulating achievements. I learned to advocate for myself, to ask for opportunities, to refuse exploitation disguised as experience, to walk away from spaces that demanded I shrink. I also stopped going home for every holiday. The first Thanksgiving I stayed on campus, my mother called 3 times. Natalie is so disappointed, she said. She was looking forward to having you here. I have a research deadline, I said calmly. I'll be home for Christmas. The guilt they tried to instill didn't land the way it used to. I could see it now for what it was, manipulation dressed as love, control disguised as family obligation. I came home for Christmas and stayed 4 days instead of 3 weeks. I was polite but distant, present but not available. Natalie tried to pull me into her dramas, boyfriend troubles, friend conflicts, minor disappointments she made major. I listened without absorbing it, offered simple advice without taking responsibility for her feelings. She looked at me sometimes with confusion, as if I'd become someone she couldn't quite recognize. Good, I thought. Neither could I. By junior year, I'd published 2 papers in respected journals. By senior year, I was co-authoring a 3rd with my advisor. When graduation approached, I made my own arrangements, invited the professors who'd mentored me, reserved my own seat in the honours section, ordered my own regalia. I told my parents the date and location. I didn't beg them to come. I didn't ask them to be proud. They came, of course. Appearances mattered. And this time, when I arrived at the auditorium, my seat was empty. I sat down in the front row, adjusted my honours cords, and waited. Natalie arrived with my parents 20 minutes later. She was dressed beautifully, as always, a rose-coloured dress that caught the light, her hair perfectly styled. She spotted me in the honours section and moved toward my row. "Sienna," she said, her voice carrying that familiar sweet edge. "Mum wanted me to sit here for pictures. The angle is better from the front." I looked at her calmly. "No." She blinked. "What?" "This is the honours section. You're not graduating. You can sit with Mum and Dad." Her smile faltered. "But I've sat with you at everything, and Mum really wants good photos." "Natalie." My voice was quiet, but absolute. "Find another seat." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, then hurt, then something harder. She'd never heard me refuse her directly before, never been denied something she asked for in that practiced, pleading way. "You're being selfish," she said softly. "No," I replied. "I'm being clear." My parents had caught up by then, noticed the tension. My mother's gaze moved between us, assessment rapid and automatic. "What's going on?" she asked. "Sienna won't let me sit with her," Natalie said, her voice taking on a wounded quality. "The front row is reserved for honour graduates," I said evenly. "Natalie can sit with you." My mother's mouth tightened. "Sienna, don't make a scene. It's just a seat." "You're right," I said. "It's just a seat. My seat, which I earned." The silence that followed was electric. My father looked uncomfortable. Natalie's eyes had begun to shimmer with tears. Real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. My mother's expression was cold, disappointed, the look she gave me whenever I failed to be accommodating enough. "Fine," Natalie said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'll sit in the back, even though it's your graduation and I came all this way to support you. But if you don't want me here—" "I didn't say I don't want you here," I interrupted gently. "I said you can't sit in the honours section." Natalie turned and walked toward the back of the auditorium, her posture carefully conveying injury. My parents followed without another word, their silence a familiar form of punishment. I sat down and waited for the ceremony to begin. This time, I felt no guilt, only quiet certainty. The ceremony was beautiful. I walked across the stage to genuine applause. I accepted my diploma and my departmental medal. I shook hands with the dean, a woman named Dr. Helena Graves, who had revolutionised her field and now led Whitmore's College of Arts and Sciences. She smiled at me warmly. "Exceptional work, Miss Brennan. We'll be watching your career." I thanked her and returned to my seat. After the ceremony, I found my parents and Natalie outside. My mother was reviewing photos on her camera, her expression pinched. "Most of these are blurry," she said. "The angle from the back wasn't good." "I have pictures," I said, showing them my phone. A professor had taken several shots of me on stage, clear and well framed. My mother barely glanced at them. "It's not the same as professional ones." I pocketed my phone. "I'm having lunch with my research group. You're welcome to join us, or we can do a family dinner tonight." "We drove 3 hours to be here," my father said stiffly. "I assumed we'd spend the day together." "You're welcome to join us," I repeated. Natalie's eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup slightly smudged. "I don't feel well," she said quietly. "I think I need to go home." My mother immediately shifted into concern. "Oh, sweetheart, do you have a headache? Did you take your medication?" "I just need to lie down." "Of course, we'll head back now." My mother looked at me. "I assume you have other plans?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I do," I said simply. They left without saying goodbye. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, watching their car disappear. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Then I went to lunch with people who actually saw me. I spent the summer working in the research lab and preparing for my master's programme at Oxford. I moved into a small apartment near campus. My own space, clean and quiet and mine. Natalie called twice. I didn't answer. My mother sent several texts asking why I was avoiding family. I responded briefly, not avoiding, just busy. In August, I received an email from Dr. Graves asking if I'd be interested in a teaching assistantship in the spring. The position included a small stipend and teaching experience that would strengthen my academic portfolio. I accepted immediately. Oxford was extraordinary. The programme was rigorous and demanding, but I thrived in it. I wrote, researched, presented at conferences. I made friends with other scholars who valued ideas over appearances. I dated briefly, casually, without the desperate need to be chosen that had marked my previous relationships. I became, slowly and deliberately, myself. In my second year at Oxford, I received another email from Dr. Graves. She was stepping down as dean to focus on her research and was recommending potential successors to the university president. Would I be interested in returning to Whitmore as an assistant dean after completing my doctorate? The position wouldn't be immediate, 3 years away, minimum. But it was a path, a future, a tangible offer that recognised my potential. I wrote back, I'm honoured. Yes, 5 years after my graduation, I returned to Whitmore, not as a student, as an administrator. I was 32 with a doctorate from Oxford and publications in top-tier journals. I'd been hired as Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs, working directly under Dr. Graves during her final year before full retirement. My office had tall windows overlooking the quad. My name was on the door, Dr. Sienna Brennan. I remembered dying at 22 in my childhood bedroom, unmemoried and exhausted. I remembered waking up at 17 with a second chance. I'd used it. The work was complex. Policy review, student advocacy, program development. I loved it. I was good at it. And slowly, I began to understand the power I now held. I could shape opportunities. I could open doors. I could ensure that students like my former self, brilliant but overlooked, received the support they deserved. In my second year as Assistant Dean, an application crossed my desk. Graduate school admission, Master's Programme in Communications. The name at the top made me pause. Natalie Brennan. I sat back in my chair reading through her materials carefully. Her undergraduate record was average, decent grades, minimal research, with a few extracurricular activities. Her personal statement was generic, full of platitudes about following dreams and making a difference. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't strong. At the bottom of her file was a note. Father called her twice, asking about admission timeline. Mother sent email inquiring about acceptance rates. Of course they had. I reviewed the application against our standard rubric. Whitmore's graduate programs were competitive. We accepted roughly 20% of applicants. Natalie's application fell solidly in the middle range. Not an automatic rejection, but not a clear acceptance either. These applications required 2 administrative reviews before going to the faculty committee. I was one of the reviewers. I could approve it, sending it forward with a positive recommendation. Or I could reject it. I thought about the graduation ceremony, about Natalie in my seat, radiant and unbothered. I thought about my mother's camera pointed away from me. I thought about a lifetime of being second, of mattering less, of making myself smaller so Natalie could stay centred in the frame. I thought about justice, not revenge, not cruelty, just the simple, fair application of standards. Natalie's application wasn't strong enough, not compared to the others in the pool, not by Whitmore's measures of excellence. I picked up my pen and signed the bottom of the review form. Decision, not recommended for admission. Reason, application does not meet competitive standards for graduate program. Recommend applicant strengthen research experience and reapply in future cycle. My signature looked official, final, absolutely certain. I placed the form in the outgoing folder and returned to my other work. 3 weeks later, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. We'd spoken perhaps 5 times in the past 5 years, brief and surface-level conversations that satisfied the bare minimum of familial obligation. But something made me pick up. Sienna, her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk about Natalie. Hello, Mother. I'm well. Thank you for asking. She ignored my tone. Natalie received her rejection letter from Whitmore yesterday. She's devastated. I said nothing. I don't understand it, my mother continued. Her application was strong. She had good grades, excellent recommendations, and given your position there, I assumed... You assumed what? My voice was very quiet. That you would help her. That's what family does, Sienna. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the campus spreading below my window, students crossing the quad, heading to classes, carrying books and coffee and the weight of their own futures. Family helps each other, I said slowly. That's true. Exactly. So I don't understand why you didn't... Tell me, Mother. When I applied for the presidential scholarship, did you help me? When I worked 3 jobs to cover my expenses, before the scholarship came through, did you offer assistance? When I graduated with highest honours, did you make sure I had a seat at my own ceremony? Silence. Family helps each other. I continued, my tone still gentle, still measured. But you only ever helped Natalie. You only ever saw Natalie. So forgive me if I don't quite understand what you mean by family obligation. That's unfair, my mother said, her voice cracking slightly. We supported you. We came to your graduation. You came to take pictures of Natalie. Another silence. Longer this time. Natalie's application was reviewed according to the same standards as every other applicant, I said. It wasn't strong enough. That's not personal. That's professional assessment. You could have put in a word for her. Why would I? Because she's your sister. And I was your daughter, I said softly. But that never seemed to matter much. I heard my mother inhale sharply. I don't know when you became so cold. I'm not cold, Mother. I'm clear. There's a difference. Natalie is heartbroken. She thought Whitmore was perfect for her. Then she should have submitted a stronger application. How can you be so cruel? My mother's voice rose, finally losing its controlled edge. She looks up to you. She's always admired you, even when you made it difficult. When I made it difficult? I almost laughed. I spent my entire childhood making myself smaller so Natalie could feel bigger. I gave up my seat, my space, my moments, over and over and over so she could have better angles for photographs. And you're calling me cruel for applying the same standards to her that apply to everyone else? You're punishing her for things that weren't her fault. No, I said. I'm simply not giving her preferential treatment. That's not punishment. That's equality. She's your sister, my mother repeated, as if this were an argument that should end all discussion. Yes, I said quietly, and you're my mother. But you've never treated me like a daughter who mattered as much as she did. The words hung in the air between us, stark and undeniable. I think, my mother said finally, her voice cold and formal, that you've changed, Sienna, and not for the better. You're right, I said. I have changed. I stopped accepting less than I deserved. I stopped believing that loving me meant diminishing myself. I became someone who takes up space without apologizing for it. If that's not better to you, That tells me everything I need to know. Don't expect us to support this decision. I don't expect anything from you, Mother. I haven't in a very long time. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set my phone down and stared at it for a long moment. My hands were shaking slightly, but my chest felt light, clear, free. I had told the truth. Finally. Completely. And it had cost me nothing I wanted to keep. 6 months later, I was promoted to Associate Dean. The usual announcement went out campus-wide. Congratulations flooded my inbox, from colleagues, from students, from professors who'd watched my trajectory with approval. Dr. Graves herself sent a handwritten note. You've earned this. Keep going. I didn't hear from my family. I hadn't expected to. I threw myself into the work. Program redesign, equity initiatives, funding proposals. I built systems that identified and supported students who came from backgrounds like mine, who worked harder than everyone else and received half the recognition. I became known on campus as fair but exacting, someone who held high standards but provided the resources to meet them. Students began requesting meetings with me specifically, not because I was easy, but because I saw them. One afternoon, a young woman sat across from my desk, nervous and determined. She was a first-generation college student, working 2 jobs, maintaining a near-perfect GPA, while supporting her younger siblings. I want to apply for the doctoral program, she said, but I'm afraid I'm not competitive enough. My family doesn't understand why I'm still in school. They think I should just get a job. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing myself reflected back, younger, uncertain, but already so strong without realizing it. Your application is competitive, I said gently, and more importantly, you belong here. Not despite your background, but because of it. You know what matters. You know how to work. You know what you're fighting for. Her eyes filled with tears. My advisor said the same thing, but I didn't believe it until now. Believe it, I said, and apply. I'll make sure your application gets the full consideration it deserves. She left my office walking taller. I watched her go, thinking about second chances, about grace I'd given myself by refusing to repeat the same diminishing patterns, about justice that looked like equity rather than revenge. I thought about Natalie, who'd reapplied to 3 other graduate programs and been rejected by all of them. Not because I'd intervened, I hadn't, but because her applications simply weren't strong enough. She'd spent 4 years in college being praised for existing rather than achieving, and now she was discovering what the world outside looked like when it didn't automatically center her. I didn't celebrate her failures, but I didn't grieve them either. She was learning what I'd learned, that worth had to be earned, that space had to be claimed, that no one would simply hand you success because you showed up looking pretty. It was a hard lesson, but it was a necessary one. 2 years later, I became dean, the youngest person ever to hold the position at Whitmore, the first woman in a decade, the first person from a working-class background in the role's entire history. The announcement made regional news. My photo appeared in the university magazine, seated in Dr. Graves's old office, now mine, looking calm and professional and absolutely certain. My mother sent a text. Congratulations. Nothing more. No call, no elaboration. Just that one word, empty of warmth. I didn't respond. My father sent nothing at all. Natalie's message came 3 days later. A long, rambling paragraph about how proud she was, how she'd always known I'd do great things, how she hoped we could reconnect because family was important, and she missed me. I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Some bridges, once burned, didn't need rebuilding. Some distances were healthier than proximity. Some silence was more honest than forced reconciliation. I focused on my work. I expanded the scholarship programs. I recruited faculty from diverse backgrounds. I created mentorship initiatives and research funding for students who'd been traditionally overlooked. I made Whitmore a place where excellence was measured by substance rather than performance, where students were valued for their minds rather than their ability to photograph well. I made it the place I'd needed when I was younger, and in doing so, I healed something in myself I hadn't known was still bleeding. 5 years into my tenure as dean, the university hosted a major academic conference. Scholars from around the world gathered to present research, network, attend keynote speeches. I was one of the keynote speakers. My talk was on equity in higher education, on creating systems that recognize talent, regardless of background or circumstance. The auditorium was packed. The applause afterwards was sustained and genuine. During the reception that followed, a young woman approached me, vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place her immediately. "Dean Brennan," she said. "I don't know if you remember me." I studied her face, something about the eyes, the careful smile. "I'm Natalie's friend from high school, Emma Hartley. We met a few times at your house." Recognition clicked into place. "Of course. Hello, Emma. I just wanted to say your talk was incredible, really. I'm a graduate student now at State, and everything you said about supporting first-generation students resonated so much with my experience. Thank you," I said sincerely. "That means a great deal." She hesitated, then continued. "I also wanted to say, I'm sorry for how things were back then. I didn't understand it at the time, but looking back, I can see how unfairly you were treated. Natalie was my best friend, but that doesn't mean I should have been blind to how your family dismissed you." The apology surprised me. I'd long stopped expecting acknowledgement from anyone connected to that part of my life. "You were young," I said gently. "We all were." Still, Emma looked uncomfortable but determined. "I see Natalie sometimes. She talks about you occasionally. She doesn't really understand why you're not close anymore." "No," I said quietly. "I don't imagine she does." "She says you changed, that you became distant and cold after you went to Oxford." I smiled slightly. People often interpret boundaries as coldness when they're used to having none. Emma nodded slowly. "That's fair. For what it's worth, you seem happy, genuinely happy. And Natalie seems," she paused, choosing words carefully, "like she's still trying to figure out who she is." "I hope she does," I said, and meant it. "I hope she finds herself. But I can't be part of that journey. Not anymore." "I understand," Emma smiled. "Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, what you're doing here matters. The students you're helping, the systems you're changing, it matters." "Thank you," I said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear today." She left, and I returned to the reception, to conversations with colleagues and scholars, to a professional life I'd built entirely through my own effort and vision. I thought about Natalie, still trying to figure out who she was at 33. I thought about my parents, growing older, probably confused about why their elder daughter had simply stepped out of their lives. I thought about the girl I'd been at 17, waking up with a second chance and choosing to use it. I felt no regret, only peace. 10 years after becoming dean, I received a letter. It arrived by mail. Joel, an actual handwritten envelope, rare enough to catch my attention. The return address was my parents' house. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Inside was a single page, my father's handwriting, shakier than I remembered. "Sienna, your mother had a stroke last month. She's recovering, but has difficulty speaking. The doctors say she'll regain some function, but not everything. She asks for you. Not with words, she can't manage those yet, but with gestures, with your name written on paper. She wants to see you. I'm not sure what to say beyond that. I know we haven't spoken in years. I know there are reasons for that. But your mother wants to see you, and I'm asking if you'll come. Your father." I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was refusal. Why should I rush to her bedside after years of being dismissed, diminished, erased? Why should her crisis create an obligation I'd never felt from her in return? But beneath the anger was something softer. Not forgiveness, exactly, just curiosity, tiredness, a faint desire to close a door I'd left ajar. I booked a flight home. My childhood house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was fading. The garden my mother had once obsessed over was overgrown, weeds tangling through the flower beds. My father answered the door. He'd aged dramatically, hair fully grey now, shoulders bent, face carved with new lines. "Sienna," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded and stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Vanilla and old books and something indefinably familial. I followed my father upstairs to my parents' bedroom. My mother was propped up in bed, looking fragile in a way I'd never seen. Her hair was white now, thin against the pillow. Her right side seemed weaker, her hand curled loosely on the blanket. Her eyes found mine. Something flickered there, recognition, emotion, something complicated and unnameable. "Hi, Mum," I said softly. She made a sound, half word, half exhale. Her good hand reached out slightly. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. "Dad said you wanted to see me." She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. Her mouth worked, trying to form words. Finally, she managed one. "Sorry." The word hung between us, small and enormous. "For what?" I asked gently. "Specifically." She gestured vaguely, at me, at herself, at the space between us. Her frustration was visible, the inability to articulate what she meant. "For not seeing me?" I offered. "For always choosing Natalie over me? For making me feel invisible in my own family?" She closed her eyes, tears spilling over, nodded. I sat with that for a moment, the apology I'd wanted for 20 years, arriving now when words were impossible, when time had already carved its permanent distance between us. "I forgive you," I said finally. Not because I'd forgotten, but because holding on to it served no purpose anymore. "I forgive you, but I can't undo the distance. Too much has happened. I've built a life that doesn't include you. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity." She opened her eyes, searching my face. "I'm happy," I told her. "I'm successful. I'm exactly who I want to be. And I got here by letting go of the need for your approval. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, painfully. "I can visit occasionally," I continued. "I can call sometimes, but I can't be the daughter who comes home for every holiday and pretends the past didn't happen. I can't rebuild something that was never properly built in the first place." Another nod. Her hand reached out trembling and touched mine briefly, not grasping, just connecting. I sat with her for an hour, mostly in silence. My father brought tea. We drank it quietly, the three of us, the weight of years settling between us like dust. Before I left, my mother gestured to her nightstand. There was a photo there, my graduation photo from Whitmore, the one from my doctoral ceremony at Oxford, my official dean portrait. She'd kept them, all of them. "You were proud," I said softly. "You just didn't know how to show it in a way that I could feel." She nodded, crying again. "That's not my burden to carry anymore," I said gently. "But I hope it brings you peace to know that I made it anyway." I kissed her forehead and left. I never saw my mother again. She died 6 months later, quietly, in her sleep. I attended the funeral. Natalie was there, of course, looking older, tired, her beauty now edged with something harder. She tried to approach me, but I kept my distance. We exchanged polite condolences, nothing more. My father asked if I'd speak at the service. I declined. There was nothing left to say that mattered. After the funeral, I returned to Whitmore, to my office with its tall windows, to my work shaping futures, opening doors, ensuring that students who worked in silence received the recognition they deserved. I thought about my mother sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with distant sadness. She'd been limited by her own limitations, unable to see beyond the surface, unable to recognise worth that didn't photograph well. I pitied her for that. But I didn't mourn her. She'd had her chance to see me. She'd chosen not to. That was her loss, not mine. 20 years after my rebirth, I stood in the same auditorium where I'd once watched Natalie take my seat. I was giving the commencement address now, as dean, as the keynote speaker, as someone who transformed an institution and shaped thousands of lives. The auditorium was full, graduates in their regalia, families in the stands, faculty on the stage. I looked out at all those faces, hopeful, nervous, proud. I began to speak. 23 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now. I worked harder than I thought possible. I earned every honour, every recognition, every achievement through dedication and sacrifice. And when the ceremony came, I found someone else sitting in my seat. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, I continued. I'm telling you because that moment taught me something crucial. No one will hand you the recognition you deserve. No one will automatically see your worth. You have to claim it. You have to take up space without apologising. You have to refuse to make yourself smaller for someone else's comfort. The graduates leaned forward, listening. You will face people who don't see you, who dismiss your achievements, who ask you to step aside so someone else can shine. And in those moments, you have a choice. You can comply, making yourself smaller and smaller until you disappear. Or you can stand firm. You can say no. You can claim the space you've earned. I paused, letting the words settle. I chose to stand, and it changed everything. Not immediately, not easily, but completely. I'm standing here today because I refused to accept less than I deserved, because I learned that taking up space isn't selfish, it's survival, it's dignity, it's the foundation of every meaningful achievement. I looked out at the sea of faces, seeing myself reflected in so many of them. So graduate today knowing this: you belong here. Your achievements matter. Your voice deserves to be heard. And anyone who asks you to diminish yourself to make them comfortable isn't someone you need in your life. The applause began slowly, then built, sustained, powerful, genuine. I stepped back from the podium and took my seat on the stage, and this time, it was exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, alone in my office, I stood at the window watching the sunset paint the campus gold and rose. I thought about the girl who died at 22, exhausted and unseen. I thought about the girl who woke at 17 with a second chance. I thought about all the choices I'd made differently, every boundary set, every standard maintained, every moment I'd chosen my own worth over someone else's comfort. I thought about Natalie, wherever she was now. I'd heard through Emma that she'd eventually finished a graduate degree somewhere, was working in marketing, was married with children. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd found herself. But I felt no need to know the details. She'd been given every advantage, every grace, every automatic centre stage I'd been denied. What she'd done with those gifts was her own story now, separate from mine. I'd made peace with that. I'd made peace with everything. My phone buzzed, a text from a colleague about tomorrow's meeting. I responded briefly, then returned to the window. The campus was quiet now, students heading to dinner, to libraries, to their own futures. Somewhere out there, someone was working harder than everyone else. Somewhere, someone was being overlooked. Somewhere, someone was learning to claim space. I'd built systems to help them. I'd created pathways. I'd opened doors. But ultimately, they'd have to walk through themselves, just as I had. I smiled slightly, turned from the window, and gathered my things. Tomorrow, there would be more work, more students to support, more systems to improve, more futures to shape. But tonight, I would go home to my quiet apartment, pour a glass of wine, and sit in the peace I'd built for myself. The peace that came from finally being seen, not by my family, not by people who'd never valued me properly, but by myself. I saw myself clearly now, completely, without apology, and that, I realised, was the truest form of rebirth, not being given time back, but learning, finally, to live it on my own terms.